That way, as you're working on the background, if you get stuck, maybe you jump over to Illustrator, start working on the character, and then come back to After Effects after you've had a minute. This is just so you can see a more finished version of my background. I've added some glows, I've added some sound effects, I've added some lights into it. All right, so extra stuff that I put inside this one just so you can see it. Here's a bunch of sound effects so that every time he breathes out, I have a sound effect for breathing out and breathing in. Every one of my sound effects that I had, I brought into Audition, and I basically tweaked the speed and length of them. So he was breathing too fast, so I slowed it down. Inside Audition, there's a thing called speed or stretch, and you're able to stretch that piece of audio out and control the pitch so it doesn't get like super low or super high. So you can play with those too. Same thing with the walking. The walking is actually him walking on gravel, but when it's slowed down, it sounds like it's walking on like crunchy snow. And then the wind, I think I just lowered the levels on that. The spotlight that's inside here, just so you can see my lighting setup, if I go to my left view, I have a spotlight. Where are you at? There's one there. Oh yeah, they're both in the same spot, right? So I have both spotlights like right here. One of them is just kind of like an overall, just like coloration to the entire scene. I created a spotlight. I changed the intensity to really low, gave it this bluish color. And this is the one that casts shadow, so I have some kind of shadow in the scene. My other spotlight is a bit brighter, but the shadow darkness is really low, so you don't really see the shadows from this one. With every scene, you may just want to add some lights and then see what they do. The idea with them is just to get them into a position to help fill the scene up so that you have, obviously, the look you're going for. Without the lights in the scene, everything is way too like blown out and you kind of lose the illusion of it being like a night scene. But then with the lights, now we're adding more of that. It feels like night to it. What else is this? This is the smoke that I have coming out of his mouth. And I'm just going to switch to a new comp just so you can see how I did this. I used a plugin called Particular. You can look more into Particular to see exactly how to do the specifics of this type of thing, because you obviously may not want that. But with Particular, you can do all these really cool kind of like smoke, fire, fluid type things. So there's like this just point smoke one. I'm just going to use that as my base. And as it plays, you can see there's the smoke. And then just by going into the menu items, you can basically just kind of control what it's supposed to do. So in this case, I actually had it going, not there, directional. And I changed the direction. And then I added more velocity to it. And then you can see now how it just like goes and comes out like that. Now mine's different, obviously different colors. And then I keyframed this particles per second. So basically it would start off at 0. I would scooch up a little bit. I would have it go up to, let's say, 200. And then right after that, it would go to 0 again. Okay, and then obviously playing with where these actually happen and how much they actually come out, I'm able to get that kind of effect. With Particular, you can actually take the position of this, and it's a 3D position. So wherever this is moved, I'm able to get this lined up with exactly where I want the smoke to be coming out of. So what I did was using the same kind of stuff I showed in the last one, where I can alt-click here, and then have this being controlled by something else, I did that to the camera. So I basically said that the position of this emitter is going to be the same position as the camera, and then I offset it a little bit so it was just basically in front of the camera. And then it works out pretty good because then as he turns, the smoke kind of like stays behind. Another thing that I could have done for this kind of setup, I could have found a video of just smoke coming out, like someone breathing smoke, and then just put that right on top of my video and just made sure that as my guy is blowing the smoke out, he's always facing straight, and that would have worked too. The camera I showed last time, just setting some basic keyframes on. That's my house. Let me isolate these. All right, so this is the building that I created. This side here, I actually built inside of After Effects because it was easier just to line everything up right inside of it. But I could have also gone, just ignore that for now. I guess I'll just draw this off to the side. As I was drawing these pieces, here is the top of the house. Let me put a point in the middle. That didn't work. Try that again. There we go. I could have built that up like that and then built all my other pieces off this as well. So I could have said, okay, if this is how tall it is, it's going to be that long. And then for the roof, it's going to be this big by however long that side is. I'm a bit off, so I'll just adjust to that. And then it does help when you're building those things inside of Illustrator to get it all lined up here as opposed to in the other one. Now I don't see the other sides of it, so it doesn't matter. I just built those three sides. And then inside of After Effects, I just took each one of these pieces, made sure they were 3D, and then I rotated them and positioned them so they were lined up. Then I made a null. I took all the pieces and parented them to the null. That way I have one spot where I could rotate this whole thing around if I need to, or scale the house down, or reposition the entire house. Oops. Come on. There we go. Okay, so that's the only things that since last time that I have inside my scene. But pretty much the environment is oh, the moon too. I forgot about the moon. The moon is a couple things. It's a solid, so just a solid color blue. And then on top of it, I'll isolate this. To get the shape of it, I created a mask. So I just went to my shape, drew a mask around where I want the moon's shape to be. And then I added a turbulence to it to give it that color. And then I added a glow to it to give it a glow. And then you stick it way in the back and then it looks like a moon. Okay? You'll find that the more details you have inside your scene, the closer you're going to be to getting it to a finished piece. Other stuff in here that you may not even notice is I have several layers of just clouds. So these are basically just like smoke kind of in the scene. And I basically put this throughout my entire scene just to feel like it has some sort of depth to it. Each one of these things is a solid with a turbulence and a mask on it. And then I've just animated, I've animated this turbulence offset, so that's what makes it go left and right. And then I've also animated the evolution, and that's what makes it feel like the smoke is actually moving. And then you get something that looks like that. All right, so that's as far as I did from last time. So for your Angry Bird, not Angry Bird, but your character stuff that you're going to build, like I mentioned before, you want to keep in mind the direction that your character is going to be facing. So if your character, like mine's going to be jumping out from, like jumping sideways, so I want to see the front of his face, so I would draw it from the front is how I would draw my character. These are past assignments. We did it differently, but it's very similar to what we're doing now. Anything that we're going to animate needs to be on a separate layer. So right pupil and left pupil are on separate layers. That way when we get inside of After Effects, we could actually animate these things moving as we need to. I would also recommend, if you do have your pupils, you would separate each one onto its own separate layer. That way, in case you needed to move one pupil one way, another pupil another way, you could do that. Just as a for instance, let's say I move this here, it might make sense to have that one, you know, kind of there versus having it in the same exact spot as it. You may want to tweak it some. Or if you wanted your guy to go like cross-eyed or something, you can't do that if they're both on the same layer. So I would say keep your pupils on separate layers. This one is a little bit further than they needed to go. They actually put each eye on a separate layer. Each nostril is also on a separate layer. The nose here and the nose there are on separate layer, or the lip is what that is. The helmet's on a separate layer, so that can move. And the highlight is also on a separate layer. Those could have been on the same layer. That way they both move together. And if this is going to be something that would come up, obviously you'd want to build the entire bird's head there, or at least enough of it so that as the helmet did, let's say the character jumps and his helmet comes up and then comes back down. If it comes up too much, we lose that illusion of, you know, it being actually on his head. And the same thing with these like helmet straps. We'd want those to also be part of that whole group of that for that. These things here, and then there's the face fill. Okay. Here's another one. This one's from a 3/4 view. And again, you'll see this one has little hairs at the top of here. They have the left eyebrow and right eyebrow separated. That way they can control the eyebrows if they want to control the eyebrows. This one also has several different beaks. If you wanted your character to have different expressions, you can do that by switching between different layers. So if this bird has his mouth closed here, and then I want to see his teeth, I can just switch between these two different layers. I can say, okay, in one frame it's closed, the next frame the beak is showing the teeth, and the next frame the beak is open. Okay. Now it will not transition between all of these, it'll just jump between them, but it happens so fast for what we're doing, it works fine. Same thing with the eyes closed. Here's one with the eyes closed, there's one with the eyes open. So I can toggle that on and off. Here's pupils left, here's pupils right. So again, we can control it separately, and then here is body. If this person, they put the hair on a separate layer so that they could, if I click on this and move my pivot down to the bottom here, so they could do like this kind of animation on it. You may want to go further with yours and say, okay, well I want to be able to control each leaf individually and each piece of hair individually. Then I would have each one of those pieces on its own separate layer. Okay? You don't have to do that, but I just want you to be aware of it so that when you get into After Effects, everything is set up. Here's another one, more of a side view. Even on a side view, you'll see that the other eye is still visible. Okay, it's not like you don't see it at all, because it looks weird when you only see a profile. It looks very flat. So same thing, here is his hair in the front. His hair strands there. Here's his hat, and you can see when I take the hat off, his head is still there. There's his hair block, his beak bottom, beak top. In this case, they have two different pieces for the beak, because in this one, they would want to animate the beak opening and closing. I don't know why it's flipping. Oh, because I'm on the wrong one. R, that's rotate. There we go. Okay, so that's again something you could do. Here's one brow, here's the other brow. Here's one pupil, there's the other pupil. So when you create your character, do it at 960 by 540, same settings we've done before. There's no difference there. Turn this stupid transparency grid off. Start with whatever shape for your specific one and just draw that. I'm not going to go through the specifics of how to do all the drawing stuff, but just obviously draw the shape of what you're going to be doing for yours. Vary the line weights. So if you see like my character, let's say that's one of his eyes here. I wouldn't want these to have the same line weight because everything, again, looks too flat. You want to have some variation. If you've never used it before, the Illustrator has this thing called a width tool. It's Shift W, and it allows you to control the width at certain points. So just by doing that, that adds a lot more dimension to the character versus having just a static, flat, boring line. Same thing on this eye here. If I go to the width tool, and let's say I just add a little bit of width here, a little bit more width here, and then I shrink down the width in these spots. There we go. So I've, again, just by adding some basic shapes, this is 2 circles, and then just tweaking those, I can get a lot more variation on what I'm seeing. Oops. Go back to that. If you wanted to add some shading to yours, here's a quick way that you can do shading. So just for instance, my guy is going to be, let's say, blue, so we'll just leave this at blue. I want to add a bluish kind of tint to this, so or like a highlight. So I'm going to hold down Alt. I'm going to drag this down, and now I have a copy of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy both of these pieces over, and I'm going to use Shift M, which is the shape builder tool. And this allows you to basically just click, like these 2 shapes are overlapping. I can click right here, and that makes that shape. It's a brand new shape now. So now I can just delete these other pieces, and now I can delete that. Now I would have this. That could then be a lighter shade of blue. That could then be just like a little highlight piece for it. If you get this where I have, okay, I'm getting these outlines here, I'm getting an outline on this shape, and they're kind of like overlapping each other, you may want another layer that's just your outline. So no stroke, just outline. That's not it. There it is. And then the other pieces that I have, this would not have an outline. Oops, that's the eye. I don't want that. This one, there we go, would not have an outline. And then this head piece would also not have an outline. That way the outline is only coming from that outer piece. And then I can just take this and move it below that, and then take this and move it below that, and I still have an outline on this. No outline on you. Yep, and I took the outline off the wrong one. There we go. So now everything is kind of nested within it inside that piece. Cool. So put everything on separate layers, save it. You can make it pretty big inside this screen if you need to. This one we're not going to be zooming in on typically, like as close as some of the other pieces, so you don't need to get right up on him. You don't need to do any special scaling or anything. On this one I get pretty close to some of my assets. That's why we did the scaling. When I'm right here, oops, a little bit further back. There we go. When I'm right here, this is that tree. That was that tiny in Illustrator that we had to then stretch out inside of After Effects in order for it to look that good. If I didn't stretch it out, it would look pretty grainy and pretty gross. So just keep those things in mind. If you have other items, remember you're going to be animating 3 things. His pupils typically are going to be one thing. That's an easy one to do. You might have 3 other things. But if you have something else, again, that'll just be on a separate layer. And just consider what you want to do for the movement. So if I draw a quick little staff right here, that goes onto a separate layer, and then this is called staff, and then I can bring that in as a separate piece. Okay? So by the time you're done with your character, you should have the character and then the other pieces that you may want to animate on him. In this one, stuff like these, I keep hitting the wrong button. These things could also be animated if he's coming out from behind the trees. They don't have to be like a huge drastic animation, but we still want to be able to see the thing move, okay? So even just like something slight like that is definitely better than not having any movement on it. Same thing with these pieces of hair. You can add those that have some waving to them if you had hair on there, okay? Oh, that's what I was going to show too. These little highlights here, that highlight right there, and this highlight here, those are all done the same way that I showed the highlight on mine. Same thing with these little bags under the eyes, I believe. If you do a gradient mesh or a gradient, that will transfer into After Effects, so you don't have to worry about coloring anything inside there. Everything will transfer with whatever you've drawn. This one, if she wanted to do, again, these kinds of things all separated and animated individually, she could have brought them in individually, but she was fine with just having them like this. Okay. You can also get very, oh, I closed it. Let me just go here, I guess. Open. You can get very in-depth into this. This is characters. One of my students who went crazy with their stuff. There we go. So this student used what's called Character Animator. It's a separate Adobe application, but basically it allows you to take all the stuff you've set up inside of Illustrator and use it as a way to animate your stuff. So it actually is like a motion capture for 2D animation. So for this character, she drew every mouth shape. So there's all the different mouth shapes here. They're all on top of each other. And then this is what that one looks like. If I find it. Except this is a lot more involved. Instead of us spending 2 weeks on this, Nikki spent about a month and a half doing this, drawing all the characters, getting all the poses, learning this character animator tool.